play that afterwards. So welcome everyone. So Jonathan asked a very good question. Is that, if a prophet is to come after Prophet Muhammad, could that prophet, after Prophet Muhammad, peace be on him, could that prophet be a non-Muslim? And the simple and short answer is no. The Islamic belief is that the Holy Quran is the final book. It is the pinnacle of the evolution of religion, and that religion was perfected by God over time, and throughout history of mankind. Whenever there was a need for a people who needed guidance, who had gone far away from morality, that God in His mercy would send those prophets. And we believe those prophets were people like Abraham, like Noah, Adam, Moses, David, Solomon, Jesus, and finally Prophet Muhammad. Now these are all the prophets that are actually contained in the Bible, and their records are very well recorded. There are other prophets that also came. So we believe Buddha, for example, was a prophet. We believe Krishna was a prophet. Confucius, Zoroaster. We even believe that Socrates might have been a prophet. So these men came with guidance for their people, for their time. And as the human intellect evolved, more and more guidance was needed, and that guidance ultimately came to its completion in the form of the Holy Quran. And the Holy Quran is that perfect book which was revealed in its entirety, and the only book that was revealed in its entirety during the lifetime of the prophet that brought it. So unlike the Bible or the Vedas or the Torah, the Holy Quran is the only one that was completely revealed and captured in the lifetime of the prophet that brought it. And the very first copies of the Holy Quran in Arabic are identical to the current Arabic that you find in the Holy Quran. So there's really only one exact version of the Holy Quran. There might be some variations in terms of the translation, but you still have the original one. So any prophet that comes now, a true prophet of God, would have to be a believer in Prophet Muhammad, and would have to bear his seal, essentially. Another great question: What is Islam's general view of Jesus? So the general view of Islam with regard to Jesus, by the way, Jesus is mentioned in the Holy Quran more than any other prophet. I don't have an exact number, but he is mentioned at least a couple dozen times, if not more. And the view on Jesus was that he was a true prophet of God. He was the Messiah for the house of Israel. He came to guide the Jews back to their original teaching. And so that is what Muslims believe. Next question. Thanks for all these questions, by the way. Next question, do Muslims believe Jesus was born from a virgin? Yes, actually the Holy Quran testifies to that. The Holy Quran testifies to the fact that Jesus Christ was born of the Virgin Mary, and that his birth was prophetic, in that it was prophesied. So Mary had revelation prior to his birth that she would be given a gift from God, a word from him, as the Holy Quran declares, that his name shall be the Messiah, Jesus, son of Mary. And immediately her response in the Holy Quran is, how can that happen when no man has touched me? And the angel replied that whenever God decrees a thing, he just says to it, be, and it is. And so, we don't fully understand scientifically exactly how that happened. There's some theories certainly out there. In the animal kingdom, you see, like for example, dolphins who in isolation have gotten pregnant without the aid of a male. And there have been other things that suggest that it might be possible. But certainly the fact that the Holy Quran declares it, we believe that that's exactly what happened. So another question by Jonathan, was Prophet Muhammad, peace be on him, poisoned? There were certainly some assassination attempts on his life, including an attempt where a Jewish woman tried to poison him and some of his companions. and one of his companions actually did eat the food that was served by this woman, and unfortunately he ingested it, and but the prophet, put the food in his mouth and immediately was given the revelation that it's poison, and so he spat it out. But unfortunately, one of his companions did eat it, and he passed away. And from that experience, the woman, when she asked why she did that, she said that was basically her test, that if the prophet would have eaten that food and died as a result of it, then he would have been a false prophet. But because he, was able to be saved by the grace of God, and that God did reveal to him that there was poison in the food, she actually ended up, as a result of that experience, actually ended up becoming a Muslim. So long answer to a very short question. Hope that makes sense. But in today's day and age, you hear all this radicalism coming from the Muslim world, and really I would say that it's not just a Muslim problem. It's the whole world is really lost in extremism. I mean, right now there's 150 people, armed men, that have taken over a federal building in Oregon. You've got all sorts of extremism happening in Africa, by both Muslims as well as Christians. You've got extremism happening in China, and of course we all see what's happening between Iran and Saudi Arabia. So this is the time, if there was ever a time when a prophet was needed, this is really the time, because the whole world is going crazy. And the message of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community is simply that, God in his infinite mercy, whenever the mankind is in need of a prophet, does provide a prophet. And that prophet has already come. His name is Mirza Ghulam Ahmad. He's the founder of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community. And his teaching is no different than the teaching of Prophet Muhammad, that we need to return back to the true teachings of what God taught. And so these teachings are the same, whether they were Prophet Muhammad's teaching in the Quran, or what Jesus taught in the Bible, or what Moses taught in the Torah, or what Confucius taught, or what Buddha taught, which is essentially that we have to reform ourselves. The reason for all this chaos and turmoil has to do with the fact that human beings as a whole have lost their balance in terms of morality, what's right and what's wrong. There's those lines have become very fuzzy. There's tremendous amounts of injustice in the world, where the rich are exploiting the poor. There is so much war and violence and desperation, and it's because of all of these things that these wars and famines occur. It's because of the injustices that human beings themselves, and the circumstances that human beings themselves have created for them. It seems like people are more interested in the Kardashian and all the other nonsense. Yeah, exactly. And so that is unfortunately the reality. And that was prophesied by the Holy Prophet, that in the latter days nothing will remain of faith, and nothing will remain of the Quran except for its inscription, and that mosques will be beautifully decorated but void of guidance. And so these are exactly the times that he predicted. These are exactly the times that Jesus Christ predicted, that in the latter days, when he comes again, nation will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom. There'll be wars and rumors of wars, and so on and so forth. So this is word for word exactly like how Jesus Christ and Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon both of them, how they described it. That's exactly what's happening. So I feel offended because I just read about the Kardashians a few seconds ago. Yeah, I think I feel the same way. Jonathan has asked another great question. What would Muhammad say about the bankers and money lenders? Well, I think Prophet Muhammad would certainly condemn them, because, first of all, in Islam, interest is forbidden. And the way that bankers and these money lenders make money is through interest. And so, even in the Holy Quran, it's strictly forbidden for Muslims to engage in taking or giving of interest, or promoting interest, because essentially what happens with interest is that money is made without anyone having to work for it. And so as a result of that, there's an imbalance in society that is created, where people start earning money without essentially having to lift a finger. Now, the Islamic way of lending money would be that there's a flat fee versus a percentage of annual percentage rate or whatever. Because with that, so if let's say if under the Islamic financial system, if someone was to borrow, let's say $100,000, you let the market decide what that flat fee might be. Also, based on the person's ability to pay and so on and so forth. It could be that bank says, okay, you know what, that's fine, I'll loan you the money, but there's a flat fee of $7,000. And so the point is that the amount of money that a bank would earn, it's fixed and is predetermined in advance. When you pay interest, there is no oh, somebody tried to join. I'm sorry, I couldn't approve you in time. There's no fixed amount, and so therefore what ends up happening is that you borrow $10,000 at 24% interest, and by the time if you make minimum payments, by the time you pay it back, you've paid back $50,000. You've paid back more than twice what the original debt was. And that's exactly what the Islam tries to avoid. So absolutely, I have no doubt that the Holy Prophet Muhammad would absolutely condemn that. Can you say something about Prophet Muhammad's final sermon? His final public words are powerful. Absolutely, and actually, if you just simply Google, final sermon. So let me just pull it up here. So it's called the Last Sermon. I'm going to read it here. So it says after praising and thanking God, he says, "O people, listen well to my words, for I do not know whether after this year I shall ever be amongst you again. Therefore listen to what I am saying to you very carefully, and take these words to those who could not be present here today. O people, just as you regard this month, this day, this city as sacred, so regard the life and property of every Muslim as a sacred trust. Return the goods entrusted to you to their rightful owners. Treat others justly, so that no one would be unjust to you. Remember that you will indeed meet your Lord, and he will indeed reckon your deeds. God has forbidden you to take usury, which is interest. Therefore, all usury obligations shall henceforth be waived. Your capital, however, is yours to keep. You will neither inflict nor suffer inequity. God has judged that there shall be no usury, and that all usury due to Abbas ibn Abdul Muttalib shall henceforth be waived." So basically, any interest is waived, but the capital must be paid back. Every right arising out of homicide in pre-Islamic days is henceforth waived, and so any killing that happened prior to the advent of Islam was waived. That the punishment for that was waived, and the first such right that I waive is arising from the murder of Rabia ibn Harth ibn Abdul Muttalib. O men, the unbelievers indulge in tampering with the calendar in order to make permissible that which God forbade, and to forbid that which God made permissible. With God, the months are 12 in number. 4 of them are sacred, 3 of these are successive, and 1 occurs singly between the month of Jumada and Shaban. Beware of the devil, for the safety of your religion. He has lost all hope that he will ever lead you astray in big things, so beware of following him in small things. O people, it is true that you have certain rights over your women, but they also have certain rights over you. Remember that you have taken them as your wives only under God's trust and with His permission. If they abide by your right, then to them belongs the right to be fed and clothed in kindness. Treat your women well and be kind to them, for they are your partners and committed helpers. It is your right that they do not make friends with anyone of whom you do not approve, as well as never to be unchaste. O people, listen to me in earnest. Worship God, the one creator of the universe. Perform your 5 daily prayers. Fast during the month of Ramadan, and give your financial obligation of your wealth. Perform Hajj if you can afford to. All mankind is from Adam and Eve. An Arab has no superiority over a non-Arab, nor a non-Arab has any superiority over an Arab. Also, a white has no superiority over a black, nor a black has any superiority over a white, except by piety and good action. Learn that every Muslim is a brother to every Muslim, and that the Muslims constitute one brotherhood. Nothing shall be legitimate to a Muslim which belongs to a fellow Muslim, unless it was given freely and willingly. Do not, therefore, do injustice to yourselves. Remember, one day you will appear before God, the Creator, and you will answer for your deeds. So beware. Do not stray from the path of righteousness after I am gone. O Prophet, no prophet or messenger will come after me, and no new faith will be born. Reason well, therefore, O people, and understand words which I convey to you. I am leaving you with the book of God, the Quran, and my Sunnah, which is the practice of the Holy Prophet. If you follow them, you will never go astray. All those who listen to me shall pass on my words, to others, and those to others again. And may the last ones understand my words better than those who listen to me directly. Be my witness, O God, that I have conveyed your message to your people. So this is it's really powerful. I agree with you. It's an absolutely a powerful message. And I do like reading it every now and then, and it really it's electrifying for me personally. Thank you for that wonderful question. Hey Anisa, how are you? So yeah, so we've got a seat open if anybody would like to join me and have a vocal dialogue versus having you guys type everything in. That'd be awesome. You're on the train. Okay, no worries. I understand. But yeah, so some great questions asked. Okay, yeah, no, absolutely. If you get a chance, you get off the train somewhere, definitely hop on here. My wonderful wife brought me some nice hot tea. Yeah, I don't know if they're coming. I thought I did tweet this out, so I think you guys got my tweet, right? I don't know if they're gonna be joining. Thought I did tweet it out. Yep, it's out there. And Ma, that girl from Saudi, hope she knows we are here in the blab. Yeah. If anybody has any other suggestions, please let me know. But good. So great questions, Jonathan. Thank you. Anybody else has any other questions, or what do you guys want to talk about? What's on your mind? What I was hoping to do is get maybe someone of the Christian faith and someone on atheist and maybe someone of a different faith come out here and we can start talking about it. So Jonathan, one of the criticism was Muhammad was his position on slavery. Can you remark on this? Yes, absolutely. So Prophet Muhammad, peace be on him, dealt with slavery in the most effective way that has ever been done in the history of mankind. Um, yes, he owned slaves, and yes, he probably bought slaves and things like that. The thing is that he treated his slaves like they were his own family, and he clothed them with with the same kind of clothing that he himself would wear or would prefer for himself. The thing is that when someone has been a slave for so long, um, or maybe their entire life, they begin to um, not really value themselves all that much. And they may not have an education, they may not know how to live a free. It's one of those things. If you've never known freedom, um, you wouldn't know what to do with it if you got it. And unfortunately, what we see today, particularly with all the problems that we see in the African American community here in the U.S., it's a result of slaves being freed without giving them the opportunity to grow mentally and into a society that they could really make their own decisions. Um, you know, make their own decisions successfully and be able to advance themselves. And so what you see in primarily in a lot of the ghettos and in a lot of the poor, poverty-stricken areas, you see a lot of ignorance, and you see a lot of people not really being able to fend for themselves. And so the Holy Prophet Muhammad, peace be on him, definitely kept slaves and treated them well and taught them how to fend for themselves. And whenever a slave asked for their freedom, all they had to do was simply ask for their freedom. That Prophet Muhammad, freed them. Um, he did treat them so well that on several occasions there were slaves who refused to go, simply because they absolutely fell in love with him and they didn't want to leave him. So yeah, I mean, so what the Prophet did was release and abolish slavery slowly, ensuring that once a slave is freed, that they had the skills necessary for them to actually go out in the world and actually be a successful and productive citizen. Another question, a bit like people who spend a lot of time in prison, they get institutionalized. Exactly. So, being a slave is basically being in a prison. You get institutionalized, you define your entire existence in that framework, and it's hard for you to operate outside of that framework. And the thing is that the Holy Prophet treated his slaves so well that they did not want to leave his side. But ultimately, they realized, hey, look, I've got a lot of other options. I can do a lot of other things. I can go live my own life. Certainly, I'm still going to be around and near the Prophet, but I can go and I can do what I want. And they had the skills and the mental framework now that they knew what freedom meant, and they knew that they could not be enslaved by someone else. Because typically what would happen in that Arab society is that a slave would run away, and they would be captured by someone else, and immediately they'd go right back into that slavery mentality. So and that unfortunately is not what happened here in the United States. And hundreds of years later, we're still trying to deal with that, because there's obviously a lot of race tensions and things like that. And look, it's on both sides, right? I mean, it's African Americans who it really kills me whenever I hear them talk about, some African Americans talk about the blue-eyed devil, and then there's other whites who refer to African Americans with the N-word and in really derogatory terms. I don't think that helps race relations at all. Um, so yeah, great question, Jonathan. How long have you been on this Blab thing? Is this your first time, or are you a regular visitor? And please, I don't know if I asked you, but if you'd like to hop in that open seat, that would be fantastic. A big question is that unlike Jesus, Muhammad fought battles and was head of an army. How do you personally deal with the question of violence? That's a great question. Yeah, Prophet Muhammad did fight battles. He never killed anyone, though. But I think that if you look at the history of Muslims and the history of Islam, and you really study it closely, you realize that Prophet Muhammad, the battles that he fought in, they were all defensive. He never waged an offensive war or an offensive battle ever. Um, so just to give you a real quick version, the first 13 years of the Holy Prophet, after he turned 40 and he declared that he was a prophet of God, the first 13 years he and his followers suffered bitter persecution. His followers were tortured, persecuted, in one, just in brutal ways where, their hands and feet were tied to two camels, and then the camel was made to run in opposite directions. Prophet's own daughter was actually killed and murdered. So there was, and during that entire time, the Prophet and his followers never fought back. Then the permission was given for the Muslims to migrate. I mean, the persecution had gotten so bad in Mecca that the Muslims packed up all their belongings, whatever they could carry, and left Mecca for a city 200 some miles away called Medina. And it was there that the Prophet actually found peace, at least for a little bit, but that didn't last long either, because then what happened was that the Meccan army came and they attacked the city. And so that is when the permission to fight was given. And in the Holy Quran, if you look at chapter 22, verses 40 and 41, the very first time that the Muslims were commanded to fight, it says that permission to fight is given to those against whom war is waged because they have been wronged, and God truly has the power to help them. And then the next verse describes who those people are. It says that they are those who have been driven from their homes simply because they said, "Our Lord is God." And if it wasn't for the fact that God allowed for fighting back, surely the cloisters and synagogues and mosques and churches and churches and mosques is mentioned at the very end, they surely would have been torn down. So essentially, the fighting that is permissible in Islam is one if persecution is unbearable and you can't live there, and you migrate. If you migrate and you still get attacked, the fighting is primarily for the purpose of freedom of religion, because the Holy Quran, in that verse says that if fighting wasn't permitted, then surely cloisters and churches and synagogues and mosques would have all been torn down. And so, there are, and then during the Battle of the Ditch, where the Meccan army surrounded the city in its entirety, during that time, two of the chapters, chapter 8 and chapter 9, were revealed. And those are primarily the chapters that deal a lot with, what Muslims are to do during war. And those are the ones that are often misquoted. But understand that, there's a lot of qualifications that must be met before Muslims are allowed to take up arms. And when they do take up arms, it's not for the defense of Islam necessarily, it's for the defense of freedom of religion. And that is often something that, extremists fail to understand, and it's something that obviously, anti-Islamic, bigots fail to understand as well. The Holy Prophet Muhammad's life is an open book. I mean, you can go back and look at his life and see exactly how he treated not only his friends but also his enemies. When the Muslims finally marched on Mecca and conquered it, anybody who simply remained in their homes was protected. There was no action to be taken against them. Anybody who came under the flag of the Muslims, and I believe Bilal, who was an Abyssinian slave, he was carrying a flag. Anybody who came under that flag would be protected. Anybody who asked for forgiveness would be forgiven. And it was at that time that the man who murdered Prophet Muhammad's wife, uh, a decade earlier, came and he begged for forgiveness of the Prophet, and the Prophet forgave him. There was never a time in history where the Prophet was asked for forgiveness and he didn't forgive him. So that's a great question, Jonathan. But what I would say is that if you really study history, you'll find that the actions of Jesus Christ and actions of Prophet Muhammad, peace be on them both, are very, very similar. Jesus Christ, as recorded in the Bible, um, his prophethood lasted much shorter, according to the Bible, according to what Bible captures, than Prophet Muhammad's. But his mission was not to fight. His mission was to really revive the house of Israel, and he was going to do that in a nonviolent manner. So that was his mission. Prophet Muhammad's, peace be on him's, mission was different in that he established a new faith, and the new faith was attacked by the sword, by an army, and so Prophet Muhammad and his followers had to take up the sword in order to defend it. What has more violence, Bible or Quran? That's kind of a apples to oranges comparison, primarily because the Bible as it exists today, and depending on the version, there's 2,000 different versions of Bible in the Library of Congress. The Bible is 5 times the size of the Holy Quran. So just by the sheer volume and size of the book, the Bible does contain more violence than the Holy Quran. But again, the Bible it contains the Torah, which is the law of the Jews. It is very violent because the Jews at the time were an enslaved people, and so the teaching that was given to them was a somewhat violent one, primarily to help build their identity as a nation. And so that is what God had ordained and prescribed at that time. And of course Jesus came and he had a different message, because the Jews had actually completely gone overboard on that. The Quran does contain some violent verses, but they are all in the context of self-defense, and to promote freedom of religion, freedom of conscience. So another question was, but didn't he order a lot of Jews, men and women, to be killed? This is an allegation that is presented by a lot of people, and what history records is that particular incident, you're referring to the tribe of Banu Qurayza. Banu Qurayza was a tribe in Medina at the time of the Holy Prophet Muhammad. When the Holy Prophet migrated from Mecca to Medina, he established what is known as the Charter of Medina. This was a peace treaty between all these different tribes that were living in Medina. That was, some were Jews, some were Christians, some were, and many were Muslim. And so he established this peace treaty between all of them. That all of these were essentially citizens of the state of Medina, and Prophet Muhammad was elected as the leader of the state. He didn't ask for this position; he was elected for this position. And so, as part of the Charter of Medina, it made it incumbent upon all the parties that signed this treaty that if any one particular party from amongst those living in Medina were attacked, that all other parties were obligated to help them. And so that's exactly what happened, is that when the Muslims were attacked, most of the parties that signed that peace treaty, fought on the side of Muslims. But unfortunately, there were a few that committed treason. And Banu Qurayza was a tribe that committed treason not once, but twice. The first time they committed treason, and it was found out that they had committed treason, they were conspiring with the Meccan army. The Prophet Muhammad forgave them because they requested forgiveness. The second time, however, was when the Muslims were about to lose. I mean, they were about to be completely overwhelmed, and just by chance, through a miraculous, through a miracle, something happened that scared the Meccan army, and the Meccan army fled. And so at that time, when the battle was essentially over and Muslims had successfully defended the state of Medina, despite the fact that Banu Qurayza had committed treason, the Prophet and the Muslims went to hold them to account. Banu Qurayza, the leaders of Banu Qurayza said, obviously knew that they were in trouble. And so what they did was they said, look, we're not going to abide by the verdict of Muhammad, that we want, and they named another person, I forget his name, but essentially it was a Jewish gentleman who had recently converted to Islam, and they wanted him to be the arbitrator between the Muslims and Banu Qurayza. Well, once the Prophet and the Banu Qurayza leaders agreed that yes, he would be the arbitrator, he gave his verdict, and his verdict was according to the law of the Torah. It wasn't the law of the Quran. This gentleman said that essentially Banu Qurayza was guilty of treason, and therefore the punishment for treason as prescribed in the Torah is what will be meted out to them, and not necessarily what is in the Quran. And the fact is, if they would have simply asked for forgiveness from the Holy Prophet, he would have forgiven them. But they insisted that there should be a different arbitrator that would make the final decision, and so it was upon his decision that was based on the law of the Torah, which is the reason why the leaders were executed. There were no women and there were no children that were executed, and really the number varies quite a lot. In some exaggerated estimates say as much as 700, but in reality, if you really look at history and you kind of do some scholarly research, you find that it was probably a handful, maybe a dozen at most. So hopefully that answers your question. I'm impressed with your answers. To be fair to Muhammad, you can't judge him by modern ideas of fairness. I think he was wise and fair man in his age he lived. Absolutely, and his if you look at his laws of war are more advanced than the Geneva Convention that we so-called civilized nations follow today. His laws of war required Muslims to not damage property, to not kill any animals except for food, to not kill women and children, to not kill anybody in the service of any faith, to not kill anybody who was old, and to not kill anyone who refused to fight. So Muslims had very, very strict orders that they could only fight against those people who were actively fighting them. And if during battle someone dropped their weapon and surrendered, they were not to be harmed at all. So definitely, I mean, I would say that even today, his teachings and his ideas are, much superior to what we have today. So let me get rid of that one. You must be upset and saddened by what some are doing in his name. Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, what the Daesh or ISIS, whatever you want to call them, what they're doing is absolutely heinous. Yeah, it makes me really, really sad. No doubt about that. So, and that's the reason why I'm really doing this, right? I mean, this is my attempt to try to educate the public and to get the right story out. Harley Dude, I know you got a question here, but I'm trying to put it up on here and it's not working for me for some reason. So let me see what I can do here. Okay, Harley, Dude, I hear a lot about all the Bible translations, but I would think back in the day these guys were pretty fluent in speaking multi-languages like Arabic, Greek, Hebrew, Latin, for them to make so many mistakes in translation. Well, certainly, even today, I mean, even if, today when you translate from Arabic to English, for example, anytime you translate from one language to the other, you can have your best effort put forward, but you'll never really capture the true essence as it exists in the original language. And I think I've given this example before, but I'll give it again. The very first chapter of the Holy Quran is called Surah Al-Fatiha. It is a very short chapter. Um, it's only 7 verses, and it's the equivalent to the Lord's Prayer in the Bible. In Arabic, that entire chapter is made up of 29 words. 29 words in Arabic. But when you translate it, it's anywhere between 64 and 79 words, depending on how you translate it. And even then, the translation doesn't fully capture all the robustness of the language in Arabic. So it's, anytime you translate from one to another, you're going to lose a little bit. And so that's why a lot of people say, look, if you really want to understand the Holy Quran, you got to understand it in its original language. And there's some truth to that. I mean, obviously we can read the translation and we can get a flavor for what it says, but you don't fully capture the full meaning. And back in those days where Google wasn't available and you couldn't necessarily double and triple check that you had the exact right translation, certainly there were many mistakes that were made in the Bible. And some of these mistakes are very blatant, depending on how the Bible was translated. I've seen the same verse have two different words in it that completely changes the meaning of that verse altogether. So that's not to say that the Bible doesn't contain the Word of God. It certainly does. That there is wisdom in the Bible, but the only thing I will submit is that the Bible is no longer in its pristine condition, whereas the Quran still is in its pristine condition. I'm interested when the Quran was written and is known who wrote it. Great question. So the Quran was written over a period of 23 years, beginning with when Prophet turned 40 and he received the first revelation. It was the month of Ramadan. And revelation continued for the next 23 years, piecemeal. And on average, you're talking, 12 words a day, essentially, for 23 years. And so what would happen is that the Holy Prophet, would hear the angel Gabriel would recite the words to him. He would hear these words, and then the Prophet would recite these words, and obviously memorize them because they're revelation of God. But also, when the revelation started coming faster and faster, and Muslims grew in number, there were 4 scribes that were designated to actually write down these verses, because the Holy Prophet himself was illiterate. He did not know how to read or write his entire life. So these scribes, as soon as the Prophet would recite these verses, these scribes would write them down, and those verses were compiled in the order in which they exist today in the Holy Quran during the first caliphate. So prior to that, they were written down and they were memorized. In fact, at the time of Prophet's death, there were thousands upon thousands of Muslims who had memorized the Holy Quran from cover to cover, and so the Prophet had verified exactly what the right verses were because he himself had memorized them. He was the recipient of that revelation, and to this day, the Holy Quran remains the only book, only divine book that has been actually memorized from cover to cover by the followers of the faith. And like I said, it's only about it's about a fifth of the size of the Bible, but still to memorize the Holy Quran is no small feat. And the Holy Quran is, I mean, I'm sure you've heard of the Iliad and the Odyssey, which is like a really long Greek poem. Similarly, The Iliad and Odyssey seem like the work of a kindergartner when you compare it to the Quran. The Quran is poetic. It is, even when I was a child, it was easy for me to memorize because there's a rhythm to it. There's these words. There's a lot of alliteration and things like that. So it makes it very easy to memorize, and the words are just unbelievably rich in meaning. So hope that answers your question. So there's a few more messages here. Yeah, Harley, dude, I haven't been to that website. Somebody tell me if this is the right Quran. What I would recommend is if anybody is interested in getting a copy of the Quran, I would recommend go to this website. Oops, not that site. I'm sorry. It's .org, not .com. So MuslimsForPeace.org, you can actually order a free copy of the Holy Quran, and it will be delivered to you at your home. And the reason why I recommend the copy from here is because it's written by Maulvi Sherali, and he does an excellent job of putting it in language that is easy to follow and easy to understand. Sometimes when you read the King James version of the Bible, it feels like you're reading an altogether different language other than English. And unfortunately, that's how some of the translations of the Quran also are, is that they're very... you received your package last Friday. It comes with some great literature. Oh, awesome. Thanks, Cat8309. I hope you enjoy reading it. I also understand they also send you like a little bracelet that says love for all, hatred for none, or something like that. Is that true? At least one of the other participants on Periscope, I think, said that they also got like a little bracelet or something. That's kind of cool. But yeah, I mean, take a look at that and let me know what you think. So here's a question: what part of the Quran do you personally find the most powerful and insightful? The Holy Quran is a book that is it is so full of wisdom, and depending on the subject matter that you're interested in, it contains a lot of gems. A bracelet, a flag, and a pen. Very nice. So here's my attempt at trying to capture the things that I really like about the Holy Quran. I'm going to show it to you. So this is my Holy Quran. Okay, this is my Holy Quran. And I really like this book, and this is my attempt to try to capture the things that I really like in the Holy Quran. And about halfway through, I gave up because there's just so much stuff that you can't possibly capture it all. And I was trying to be extremely selective in what I bookmarked. And so, there's just all sorts of stuff here. There's, importance of prayer. There's, there's a lot of scientific stuff on here. There's, about the specific teaching versus about, war versus about kindness. Perhaps one of my most favorite is the verse that actually talks about the Big Bang Theory, believe it or not. So in chapter 21, verse 31, the Holy Quran declares, and I'm just going to read the English and not the Arabic. It says, "Do not the disbelievers see that the heavens and the earth were a closed up mass? Then we opened them out, and we made from water every living thing. Will they not then believe?" I mean, that's pretty remarkable that an illiterate man back in the 1400 years ago in the middle of Arabia, did not know how to read, did not know how to write, would make such a statement on his own. So he made such a statement simply because the statement came not from him but from God. So it's a great question, but that's a very hard one for me to answer. And there's a lot of truths here and a lot of prophecies here and scientific truths that were just realized this century. Prior to this, no one knew that that the universe is an expanding universe, but it's declared in the Holy Quran. No one knew that everything was made from water, but it's declared in the Holy Quran. No one knew that the earth and the moon and the sun were all in their own special orbit. It's declared in the Holy Quran. So and when you read the Holy Quran, you begin to realize that it's not an ordinary book. Unlike the Bible or some of the other holy scriptures, what you're reading is a human's point of view about what they saw or what they discovered or so on and so forth. The Holy Quran is written in first person. It is as if God is speaking to you himself. So even that in itself, in the way that it's written, is really powerful. So great question. Good stuff, guys. You guys are asking great questions. If anybody's interested, I've extended the invitation to anybody who's interested. Please, there's an open seat if you want to hop on here and join the discussion vocally, verbally. You're more than welcome. Please do join. But one thing, and the intent of me talking about the topic here is, we talk about interfaith harmony. One thing is absolutely clear from reading the Holy Quran to me is that there's absolutely no compulsion in religion. And it is so sad for me to see so many Muslim nations who have completely gone backwards with regard to this particular teaching. For example, the minorities, I already mentioned, the minorities are persecuted in Pakistan. And they have blasphemy laws there that basically target minorities. Anybody who disagrees with, one of the many numerous clerics that they have there, that they can be charged with blasphemy, and as a result, end up in jail. There's a poor woman, Christian woman, who has been accused of blasphemy. Her name is Aisha Bibi, or Asia Bibi, and she is a Christian woman, mother of 5. She has been in prison for the last 5 years on blasphemy charges, on bogus blasphemy charges. And that's really sad to see. In Saudi Arabia, for example, I mean, there's lots of good things about Saudi Arabia, but unfortunately, this is an area that's a horrible stain on the record of Saudi Arabia, in that any religion outside of Islam cannot be preached there, and no Christians can build their churches or anything else. I think that there's a few buildings that remain of churches, but no one can build like a new church or anything like that. So there's what do I think of Reza Aslan's book, No God But God? I haven't read it yet. I haven't read it yet, but Reza Aslan, he's a scholar, and he's an academic, scholar. So he's not necessarily someone that I would say is a spiritual person. He does this mainly because he's academically, from an academic standpoint, he's interested in the topic. And generally speaking, I would say I like the guy. I agree with his viewpoints. There's a very famous interview that he had with a couple of CNN anchors, where the CNN anchors were asking questions in a very, from a very biased lens, and it was, he very effectively defended, a very neutral point of view, and made both of those, news anchors look pretty silly in the process. But I don't know specifically about this particular book, so I can't comment on it. There's another question that Jonathan asks is, I've tried to educate myself on Islam. Yeah, no, and I think that, if everyone should at least attempt to educate themselves on other faiths. I think it's really sad that a lot of people, get their information about another faith from, Facebook memes or sound bites from your nightly news. I think it's really important. Like if there's a Muslim who has something to say about Christianity, rather than just listen to what an extremist mullah has to say about the Christian faith. My recommendation is for that Muslim to go pick up the Bible and read it for themselves, or at least read portions of it for themselves, so at least they can have an educated viewpoint on whatever they form as a result of that. I think the worst thing we can do is we can just listen to what others have to say about a topic and then adopt that as our own. I think God gave us a brain and intelligence, and we should at least use that for some objective scrutiny of a particular topic. It's a big book. I haven't seen. I know that he's written a couple of books. There's a book called he wrote a book on Jesus Christ called Zealot, and then No God But God. So those are the two books that I know that he's written. I haven't read either one, but I think my brother has probably interacted with him once or twice. My brother's an author as well too, by the way. He wrote if you guys are looking for a good read on a weekend, and I'm not just saying this because he's my brother. I mean, he's my little brother, so I make fun of him most of the time. But in this particular case, I'll tell you that he has written an amazingly good read. You can find it on Amazon. It's called The Wrong Kind of Muslim. It's on Amazon. Let me put it on here. I highly recommend this particular book, and it's not a preachy book. It's actually a memoir, and it's a story, is what it is, and it's a story about his visit to Pakistan and what he experienced. He does not preach in this book. He does not have any dogmatic or anything like that in it. It's just a really, really good story to read, and you can actually, I think he's enabled it so that you can read at least the first 10 or so pages on Amazon, and it's actually a really, really good it's a really, really good read. Ahmed Rashid, welcome. Interestingly, Ahmed Rashid is also my third brother's name, so welcome, brother. How are you? Again, just a few websites that I would like to share with you all. So one is muslimsforpeace.org. Another one is www.trueislam.com. And then lastly, the website for the Ahmadiyya Muslim community is alislam.org. If you want to learn more, those are some great resources that you can leverage. Am I right in saying that Islam really doesn't have officials like Christian churches? However, I say this, but Iran seems to have a very controlling religious element. What is this about? Yeah, I mean, so Islam does not have like clergy like as it exists in Christian and other faiths. In Islam, you have a direct relationship with God, and as a matter of fact, anybody in a gathering can be the imam. And so it's not, there's no like official, clergy per se. How does one become an imam? It's simply, depending on it all depends on who has the most knowledge of the Holy Quran. So if two people if there's a group of 10 people, and one person knows 5 chapters of the Holy Quran, and all the rest of the people know less than that, then that one person who has the most knowledge of the Holy Quran would be given would be the imam for that day or for that prayer. For the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, though, given our mission to teach the true teachings of Islam, we actually have a seminary school where individuals go and they learn, and they go and they study all faiths and all religions. Obviously, Islam being the focus, but also being familiar with other faiths and the books of other faiths. and it's anywhere from a 4 to an 8-year seminary school. And so those missionaries are, they've basically devoted their entire life to the service of the faith. But that's not to say that they are necessarily the only, like they have any special powers. The only thing special about them is that they know more, they have more religious knowledge. But even in their company, someone else can lead the prayer. So, and so that's a lot of times when we're trying to train, like, the young boys or young men who don't know how to lead prayer, a missionary, even though he's more learned, would tell someone who's 15, 16 years old, okay, well, why don't you lead prayer, and that way you can get to practice, and it's a valid prayer. So so there's no central figurehead except for, so in the Ahmadiyya Muslim community now there is the Ahmadiyya Muslim community. We do have the Khalifa. His name is Mirza Masroor Ahmad. So as I mentioned to you, that the founder of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community is Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, peace be on him. After he passed away, since his death in 1908, there has been a continuous line of successors. And currently we are on our 5th successor. His name is Mirza Masroor Ahmad. He lives in London, and he guides the community on spiritual matters from London. The community, under the leadership of all of our 5 Khalifas, has grown from, a small community in Qadian, India, which is a very small town, to now being firmly established in 207 nations around the globe. United States has 75 chapters, and in places like Western Africa and India and Pakistan, I mean, there's entire villages and cities that are that are comprised of Ahmadi Muslims. So yeah, I answered that one. I don't know how to remove this particular one from, because I can't get to the bottom of it. But yeah, so great question. Hey, Big Short, how you doing? So hey guys, it's about 9:23. You guys have asked some great questions, and I've really enjoyed the discussion. I'll stick around here for let's say 7 to 10 more minutes. In these last few minutes, if anybody would like to hop on to the open seat and have a verbal dialogue, please feel free. Feel free to jump on here. All right, Jonathan, welcome. So Jonathan has taken me up on this offer. How you doing, Jonathan?
Oh, not bad. I just want to thank you for answering such questions in such honest and detailed way.
Absolutely, my pleasure, and thank you for asking those questions. I know a lot of times people are afraid to, ask questions because of a fear of, offending someone or things like that. But I say, look, as long as your questions are genuine and sincere, there's no such thing as a controversial question. It's just people trying to learn.
Yeah, it is difficult, but like I said in one of my comments, obviously, you can't really take a kind of historical figure and then just take them totally out of the context of their life, the history that they were living in. Or you can do, but it's not totally. I don't think it's very fair to do that.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times, just as an example, a lot of times people object to the fact that, the Prophet had multiple wives, or the fact that, when at the time that he married Aisha, she was significantly, lower, and he was only about 16 or 15 or 16 at the time that she was married to the Prophet, when he was in his 50s. It's interesting because people who raise those objections really don't have any objection to the fact that when Mary was married to Joseph, she was aged 12 or 13, and that when she gave birth to Jesus Christ, she was 13 years old. So You got to understand it in the proper context. You got to understand, what's normal in society. And even in the United States, up until, maybe 6 or 7 decades ago, girls were getting married at a very, very young age. The state of Massachusetts, for example, to this day does not have a minimum requirement on how old a girl has to be. All that's needed is a parental consent for a girl to be married legally in the state of Massachusetts today. So I thank you for pointing that out. I think the historical context and putting it in the right framework is extremely important. We can't apply our own understanding of what life should be like to a completely different time and a completely different situation.
Yeah, the other, I don't know if you would agree with this, but the impression that I get by studying a little bit of his life is when he first had these revelations, they actually disturbed him quite a bit, and
Yes.
He wasn't like that. He particularly welcomed them initially.
Correct.
Am I correct in saying that then?
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, the very first time that he received the revelation, he was meditating in a cave. And when the angel appeared to him, the angel said, recite. And he was scared. He's like, recite what? And, then the first verses of the Holy Quran were revealed. And he was so scared, he rushed home to his wife and he was shaking. And the only thing he could, muster was to tell his wife to please cover me in a blanket because he was so scared. And so she covered him in a blanket. And, after he calmed down a little bit, he relayed to her exactly what had happened. And his wife, being a righteous woman, recognized that this was truly an angel of God who had appeared to him, and that, he was being commanded by God and being, declared a prophet of God. And so she was the first person to believe in his claim as a result of that.
Yeah, because that's another interesting thing. I don't know if you agree with this. Women, because I forgot his first wife's name, unfortunately, but she was a great supporter and a rock, really, wasn't she? And
She was.
I think I'm correct in saying that women played an important part in his life, not on the kind of traditional level, but as advisors and supporters.
You're absolutely correct. I mean, so his first wife, her name was Khadija, and Hazrat Khadija actually, at the time that she was 40 and he was 25, was so impressed with him because she was an entrepreneur, and so he actually was part of a caravan that went and sold goods, on her behalf, and it was one of the most profitable trips that she had ever witnessed. And as a result of that, she was so impressed with his honesty that she is the one who actually sent the message of the proposal of marriage to him, and he accepted. And that was, from the time that he was 25 to the time that he was 50, he was only married to her. And until, when she passed away, unfortunately, because of the persecution and the boycott and everything, once she finally passed away is when he actually married again. And we can talk about that at a future session. But women, so her, Khadija in particular, played an extremely important role in his life, and he consulted with her about everything. Harley Dude is asking a question here. Did Muhammad try to convert Jews? He tried to convert anybody and everybody that would listen. So it was not necessarily just Jews. He would preach to the idolaters, the idol worshippers in Mecca. He would preach to the Christians. He would preach to the Jews. He would preach to anybody and everybody, because the Holy Quran and Islam, it's a religion for all of mankind, regardless of what your background is. And that's the distinctive feature about Prophet Muhammad, is when he's called Khatam an-Nabiyyin, which is seal of the prophets, is to say that every prophet, regardless of the faith that they brought, he is the only one that is given authority to testify to the truth of all of those other prophets. So Jesus himself said that he came for the house of Israel. Moses came for Israel. Confucius came for his people. Buddha came for his people. It is only Prophet Muhammad that came for all of mankind. So yes, he sent his message to anybody and everybody that would listen.
And then you got this, probably not getting this right. He had this dream where he's on a kind of mystic horse, and he flies. Is it flies from Jerusalem to
Yeah,
Jerusalem or
he
something?
he he, he flies to Jerusalem, and it was a vision. It was either a dream or a vision that he had. It wasn't a physical ascent. It was a spiritual ascent. And Harley, dude, Islam forbids um, advancing the faith via force. Um, Several times in the Holy Quran, God commands and declares to Prophet Muhammad that you are only a warner. You have no authority to compel them. And even, there's a declaration in the Holy Quran that La ikraha fid din, there is absolutely no compulsion in religion. Right has become distinct from wrong. So whoever refuses to be led by those who transgress has grasped a strong handle that knows no breaking. So there is absolutely zero tolerance for spreading the faith by force.
Yeah, the other thing I would observe is whenever society is under stress, as I put it, in Christianity, there's been periods where there's been mass murder. The kind of in England there's been circumstances where Catholics were burnt, Protestants were burnt. There's been incidents in modern history. In North America, they burnt women as witches.
Yeah,
But you normally find it's when a society's in stress or turmoil that it kind of these kind of forces of fundamentalism appears, and it's kind of words are twisted. And,
absolutely.
it's used as an excuse for
I'm sorry,
external forces.
You're cutting out a little bit, Jonathan. I apologize.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
but no, you're absolutely right. I mean, that's Islam is kind of going through the same thing that Christianity went through about 300-400 years ago, or maybe even longer, where you see some horrible things being done in the name of Islam, precisely under that justification that Islam requires it, where in fact it does not. A very common misconception is that Islam requires the penalty for apostasy, which is someone who chooses to leave the faith of Islam. They say that the penalty for that is death, which is absolutely false. There's nothing in the Holy Quran that supports that at all. It looks like you've got a question here. How long have you been studying about Islam?
for
Yes,
me.
you.
Me. I got really interested in it about 3 years ago, because I knew quite a few. Had friends and colleagues who were Muslim when I was living in
Hmm.
London, but I really didn't know too much about it. And I started reading a couple of books about it. I think one of the things people don't realise, it's like any religion, Christianity. I I'm not kind of orthodox Christian, because some of my Christian beliefs are not very orthodox.
Okay.
uh, um, I'm more influenced by the Gnostic tradition of
Yeah.
Christianity, and the the Gospel of Mary and Thomas. I'm more influenced by them than the more traditional Christian. But I understand there's mystic traditions in Islam as well, isn't there? There's certain
Yeah.
sects of Christianity.
Sufism is kind of like one of those sects within Islam. But it's interesting because when you really look at the teaching, and this is what I try to tell everybody, and I don't know if you'd agree with me on this, but if you really look at um, the teaching in terms of how a person should behave, regardless of religion, Christianity, Judaism, Confucianism, Buddhism, Islam, they all teach that a person should focus on self-reformation, and a person should focus on living a good, pious life, a peaceful life, a life serving mankind, serving the poor and the needy, respecting the elders, and so on and so forth. So it's interesting that the actual teachings of all these faiths is very similar in terms of how a person should behave and how a person should live their life. What's vastly different is their interpretation of the Creator. So the interpretation of what God is vastly different, but the teaching of how a person should live, virtually identical.
Yeah, so this I'm going to have to go in a second, but my last question, I forgot. This term that's used in Islam for kind of holy war.
Jihad. Jihad.
Am I jihad? Am I correct in saying that actually more applies to an internal struggle
Yes.
that every Muslim should
Yes.
have? It's not about it's just been twisted as external threat, but its real meaning is every individual's internal struggle.
No, yeah, that you're absolutely 100% correct. Jihad itself means to struggle. It just simply means to struggle, and the implied struggle is against evil. And so there's evil within oneself. It's evil within one's personal desires and personal thoughts. There's also evil in society, and there's evil in terms of fighting an oppressive army. And unfortunately, the extremists only think about that last version, which is they want to fight an oppressive army. But even then, their actions are to fight against innocent civilians versus an oppressive army. So you're absolutely correct that the primary meaning of jihad is self-reformation and fighting against the evil within oneself.
Yeah, I wish you, thank you for so much for holding this. I just pray for open Jerusalem, where all faith, in an open city where all faiths. I hope to go to Jerusalem one day myself, and pray in the holy places of Islam, where Jesus and where the Old Testament. And I hope one day it will become the peaceful city where all faiths can pray and.
Amen. I couldn't have asked for a better prayer. So thank you very much, Jonathan, for joining us today. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
Bye. Harley Dude has a question here. Does penalty for apostasy come from Sharia law? No, in fact, it does not. Sharia law refers to the commandments in the Quran that govern the daily life of a Muslim. So Sharia law is everything from wash your hands and pray 5 times a day, to inheritance law and everything in between. It's meant to be a religious law that is self-imposed by a Muslim individual or a group of Muslims. It's never meant to be a secular law. And the death penalty, in particular, there's no penalty at all that is prescribed in the Holy Quran for apostasy. If anything, the Holy Quran, it gives examples of people who believe, then disbelieve, then believe again, and then disbelieve again, and then die as disbelievers. So there's twice that they believe and twice they disbelieve. And so if the death penalty was allowed in apostasy, then the first time they disbelieved, they should have been killed. But no, it's they believed, they disbelieved, then they believed again, then they disbelieved, and they die as disbelievers. God has a penalty for them in the afterlife. But there's no worldly punishment at all that human beings are supposed to mete out for the punishment or for the crime of apostasy. Yeah, my boy Saeed from Palestine is very cool. Yeah, I mean that whole region unfortunately is a complete mess, and I pray for peace in that particular region because I think that has been the cause of a lot of unrest in the world, particularly in the Muslim world, unfortunately. So it is what it is, and we just hope that one day all those people, the Jews, the Arabs, the Christians, and anybody else who would like to call that area home, they can live in peace without fear of being murdered or stabbed or shot or blown to bits. Um, so on that note, hey, I want to thank all of you guys for joining this session. Hope you guys have enjoyed it. I'll try to do this a couple times a week. I think 8 o'clock seems like a pretty good time. So unless you guys have a suggestion or a request for some other timing, I'll try to stick with this time. But thank you so much for your time today. Um, Please continue to work in your own personal circles to try to promote peace, and try to live a peaceful life yourself. And I think that that's really what's needed in the world today. Is there's a lack of peace, there's a lack of just understanding, and so this is exactly what I'm trying to do is to try to open up channels of dialogue and help people understand things that perhaps they don't understand. So thank you so much for your time, and I wish you the best. Godspeed. Have a wonderful evening.